A question that I get texted all the time is, how do I cook a steak? So I always tell them basically the same thing. Get the biggest steak you can afford, get the best type you can afford, like prime, and then you reverse sear it. Now there are a lot of ways that you can cook steak to your preference. The easiest one, in my opinion, is the reverse sear. You bake it to an internal temperature of like the doneness that you like, and then you sear it on the stove with a nice, to get a nice crust. It's the easiest to explain, it's the easiest to do, and the results are my favorite. Now there are other ways to cook steaks, but the reverse sear is basically you cook it until it's the middle of the temperature that you want in the middle, and then you sear it for that nice golden brown caramelized crust. It's the best. So today, that's what we're gonna do. I've got a tomahawk steak, which I cannot wait to make. Now, normally I don't get these because you pay a lot of money for the tomahawk steak, even in the grocery store, and you're paying for weight, and a lot of that weight is in the bone. However, it makes for a better YouTube video. So we're gonna do that. If you don't wanna buy that or get the tomahawk, get the biggest, thickest ribeye that you can. It's the same thing, just minus the bone. So that's what we're gonna do today. Now, the key things here are we wanna get a good internal temperature, so we wanna cook it internally, and then we wanna get a nice golden crust. And one of the most important ways to do that is to remove the moisture from the outside of the crust, or the outside of the meat. So what we're gonna do first here is, if you're out of time and you're in a hurry, what you should do is salt your meat, season it up, and put it in the oven or whatever method you're gonna use to heat it up. Today we're gonna use a smoker. I'm a smoker guy, obviously. If not, salt it up, let the juices come out, then reabsorb, give it at least an hour, and for best results, do it overnight. So that's what we did here today. I happen to have the time and the planning because I knew I was gonna make a video, but more often than not, I season my stuff and then I cook it immediately. It works best for my schedule, and that's usually one of the easier options. So again, what we want to do when you salt up your meat, it's going to draw out the moisture. You're going to see the puddle on top. That's okay, because that's going to reabsorb back into the meat if you give it enough time before you cook it. So that's what we're going to do here. Now again, I had the time to do it, so what I did was I did my custom blend of 60-40 and a little bit of celery seed in there. 60-40 salt and pepper with a little bit of celery seed in there. I used that. Then I added some more kosher salt because it's a really thick cut of meat that I wanted to make sure that I had plenty of salt and plenty of good penetration on it. And then I did a little bit of the Meat Dave seasoning. It's one of my favorites. It adds really good texture. Just a little bit though, because it's already got salt in there. I don't want to over salt the meat. But again, the cut is really thick, so I did a little bit of all of that. The salt and pepper blend, the extra salt, and then the seasoning. That's gonna be great. So Meat Dave, as you know, is one of my favorite seasonings. It's great for steak, all purpose. It's gonna be perfect. So first thing we're gonna do, get it seasoned up, and then I'm gonna stick it in the fridge and come back and get it the next day. Okay, it's been about 24 hours and I've pulled it out of the fridge. Look at this juicy cut of meat, juicy. But you see, not a lot of the moisture there. It's not pooled on top. It's got plenty of salt on it, plenty of seasoning. So now we're also gonna put it in the smoker, which is gonna help that. I'm gonna use an internal probe until I get to a temperature of 125. Then I'm gonna bring it in and then we're gonna do a sear on the stove. Now, let's get this with a probe and onto the smoker, 225. Go into the middle here, so I'm getting the center of the meat, but not touching the bone. All right, the steak is almost done, so let's get the pan preheated, and then we're gonna use some Wagyu beef tallow. You can use this is a great option, or something that's a high smoke point oil, such as grapeseed oil or something like that. Something with a high smoke point, because this is gonna be a high heat maneuver. So we wanna get the pan heated up. We're gonna get it preheated. We're gonna put about 4 or 5 tablespoons of the tallow in there, get that nice and heated right to the smoke. Then we're gonna get the steak in here. Now, I can use like a cast iron pot or a pan, but not everybody has one. So I'm kind of going to force in this giant cut of meat into this smaller pan, because more often than not, people have a smaller pan. So just kind of using the every man's thing. I have a cast iron, but I wanna kind of use the most commonly used tool. So I got a little made-in pan here, and let's get it going. Now this honkin' mamma jamma has a little bit of fat on here that I want to get fired up on there first. Let's get that scorched and then we'll put it in. if I can. So let's get it in there. Okay, super quick interjection. I'm gonna do what some would consider a sin and make this a full medium cook, which means I'm gonna flip it once or twice more before I do the aromats. And the reason is because my family likes it to the higher side of medium. Not because of the flavor, but because of the texture. So even though they are good with like the flavor of the rare, they like, or the more medium rare, they don't prefer the texture. So I'm gonna cook it to where they like it. Everybody's allowed to have it. I'd rather make a delicious steak that they wanna eat than not, but this is still gonna be delicious. So I wouldn't flip it as many times, and I'd add the aromats sooner. But I wanted to let you know that I know what I'm doing, and I'm doing this on purpose so that my whole family will enjoy the actual flavor of the steak. Thanks, back to the video. Okay, now, if you're not doing a reverse sear, you're actually gonna flip this a couple of times. The whole like only flip it once thing, that's kind of a myth. But since we're doing the reverse sear, I'm gonna give it a minute per side. We're gonna see how we like the crust. Then we'll add in the butter and do some aromatic spooning. Turn it over. Perfect so far. You are starting to get that nice color on there. We're gonna do this a couple more times. Okay, it's been another minute. We'll do it one more time after this. All right, one more time. Oh yeah. Okay, now that's looking nice. Now, while I do have probably a little bit too much oil in there, now I'm using some Kerrygold for the butter. Okay, now when you put your butter in there, you want it to be brown, not black. And that usually comes from managing your heat and using a good quality butter. So I love Kerrygold. Once this gets in there, then we'll start doing a little spooning with the aromatics. But you want your butter, but you don't want to spoon cold butter on here. You want to wait till it gets nice, hot, and sizzly bubbly. That's the kind of butter we want on there. Cold butter, not good. Now, while this is going, you can see that obviously my pan is not big enough, but that's okay, it happens. Spinalis, this part up here, that's the best part of the steak, right up there. So as long as that gets a nice crust, that's my favorite part, and then you get some of this more lean part of the steak here, that's gonna be good too. Okay, butter sizzling. Now because I've already cooked this, I'm not gonna baste it a ton, but I do wanna help get some on there. Okay, that's gonna do it for me. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. All right, now we're gonna let this rest for about 10 minutes. All right, so we've let it rest for about 10 minutes. The juices have come out. Now it's time to cut into it and see how we did. We start with the bone. Go ahead and get it out of there. All right. Cross section. Now, you can see my family likes the meat a little bit more done, so I went with a medium on this one, which is, if you want yours to be a little less medium, then just don't flip it as many times, and then just start right away with the aromats. So this is the way my family likes to eat it, which is perfect. Now you'll see from a perfection standpoint, there's a little bit too much gray band there between the crust and the meat, but this is gonna be a perfect steak in flavor and texture. And you can see it's got that nice great color, along with a very perfect crust. So if you're cooking it, you can see the juices just coming out. Ooh, this is perfect. Now, as I said before, the best part of the steak is gonna be right here in the spinalis. This is your most juicy and perfect part. Whenever they do a competition, that's where you can see that small separation of that circle there. That is where that goes. And if somebody wants a little bit more of a lean cut, give them the center part. The other part that's really delicious is this, and I always cut this up into snacks for everybody. You should cut the fat off there, but you can see it's just perfectly cooked. That's a nice medium section. Cut the fat off for just so you don't have a big glob of fat. And then we're gonna have that nice, perfect medium in there. So we have to test it, make sure it's not poisoned. So I'm gonna take a piece of the spinalis, my favorite part. Nice good crust, and the official taste. That steak, in all honesty, might be the best steak I have ever had in my entire life. I don't even have words to describe. I have a crispy exterior. It's super tender. It's got the smoke because I put it in the smoker. So I have the smoke portion. I have the crispy texture, the buttery flavor, and the subtle taste of the like aromatics. This is incredible. So I highly recommend this method, that when I spent the money on a nice big piece of steak, that it came out so good. So to quickly recap, we're gonna do a reverse sear, 225 until you reach an internal temperature of about 125. That's what I did. You're gonna bring it inside, heat up your high temperature oil, put it in the oil to get enough crust on there. For a lower temperature, more medium, do it just once or twice, and then put your aromats in there, do a butter scoop, and be good to go. Now, one quick item of caution: the more you baste, if you do a baste, I could have taken this off at without doing the butter basting. If you don't do the butter baste, you will not have as much carryover cooking as I did. The butter baste will create a higher temperature when you do butter baste. It creates a higher carryover cooking temperature, which is also why mine's a little bit more medium. Again, this is how my family likes their steaks, so I'm good with that temperature. But if you want it less, either don't do the butter basting or just do a 1 or 2 flips in order to lock in that crust. So thanks for joining. Hope you enjoyed it, and let me know how yours goes in the comments.